want to welcome you all to the 2010 One Book Villanova Author Lecture, and note that this is the fifth year of the One Book Villanova program. So really excited about the fact that we've established this really as a feature of our community life here. I'm Joe Lucia. I'm the director of the Falvey Library, a university librarian, and one of the co-sponsors of this program. And I want to welcome you to tonight's presentation on behalf of my fellow sponsors, Dr. Terry Nance, who is circulating among you, the Associate Vice President for Multicultural Affairs, and Tom Mogan, the Director of the Student Development Office here at the university. The three of us have the great pleasure every year of developing this program and working through the process of setting up events, and it really is one of the highlights of the year for us because of all that it represents. And I know you want to hear the author, but I need to thank and acknowledge the contributions of a lot of people who have worked together to make this event possible, but not only this event, some of the other follow-up events that I will mention to you briefly in a few minutes. And first and foremost, I need to recognize and express our gratitude to our generous benefactor, Mrs. Patricia Mbisi, who has helped keep this program going year after year by supporting the acquisition of the books. Many of you may not know that one of the unique aspects of this program in relation to other similar programs around the country is that we give the book to everyone on campus. There's lots of schools that do a first-year reading program, but we do this for our entire community, and that's what makes it, I think, truly unique, and it's part of what gives it its special texture in terms of really weaving the book into the lives of the campus. Second, I do need to acknowledge that enormous numbers of hours go into thinking about selecting, figuring out what to do once we've selected the book every year. And there's a committee, kind of a large committee, about, 16 to 20 people, the One Book Committee, who are all volunteers and who also work together once we've identified the book for a given year to help us organize all of the activities around that book. So anyone from the committee who's here, I want to express on behalf of myself, Terry and Tom, and the entire university community, our gratitude for everything you do to make this happen, because it's a significant and important contribution to the life of the campus. In addition to the committee members, there are some unsung heroes who, among our individual staffs who work to bring this all together. And I just want to, and because they are quietly in the background doing important work, I think it's at moments like this, it's especially relevant to say thank you to them. So, and I know when I do this, I'm going to forget someone, but so if I forget you, forgive me in advance for not mentioning. But I want to mention a few people who've really made a difference this year and in other years in bringing this program to fruition. First is Joan Prendergast in the Office of Multicultural Affairs. And also in my office, Janine Ahern. I don't think she's here tonight, but she does an awful lot of administrative work to help us make this happen. I want to express my gratitude to Tim Dietzler and the dining services people for the amazing job they do every year putting on a dinner for the community in advance of this event. I also want to thank Jonathan Gust and Kathleen Scavello from University Communication for the publicity work they do to really make the broader community aware of these activities. And this year, through their good efforts, our author was on Radio Times on WHYY yesterday morning. And you can actually, if you want to hear his author talk, his interview with Marty Moscowane, you can actually download the podcast right off their website. So that, I think, a very nice feature both for the author and for the community. Also on my staff, a couple of staff members worked to put together the slides that were showing on the screens when you came in, Stephen Spatz and Joanne Quinn. They did a really nice job finding photographs and putting them together in a collage. Nikki Hornsberry for the program this year. And all of the other staff members and volunteers from across the campus who worked together to make this event and other events possible by their dedication to all that we believe this program offers the university. And I want to mention a couple other things quickly. That tonight is the beginning, not the end, of this year's One Book Villanova programming. And there's a few events coming up in the next couple of weeks that I just am going to mention quickly. Thursday, February 4th, Mark Bowden, author of Guests of the Ayatollah and Black Hawk Down, will be giving a talk here in the Villanova room entitled The Iranian Revolution and the Iran Hostage Crisis After 30 Years. From February 6th through February 8th, there will be showings of the film Persepolis, which is based on the book Persepolis that you may or may not know is actually the selection for this year's Free Library of Philadelphia, One Book Philadelphia program. So there's a nice little overlap there. And then on Thursday, February 11th, Trudy Rubin, who is a widely read syndicated columnist from the Philadelphia Inquirer and a respected expert on the Middle East, is going to be talking on women in Iran and the Middle East. So those are upcoming events related to this year's One Book Villanova program. And alongside those, there will be some book discussions organized and facilitated among various groups on campus by members of the committee. So now, the formal introduction of our author in his book. One important goal of this program, as it was conceived and as I believe we executed from year to year, is to foster a campus-wide climate of cultural and intellectual engagement through reading and conversation and through the sharing of books and stories that enlarge our understanding of and empathy for people whose lives and experiences are different from our own. This year's One Book selection, Rooftops of Tehran, presents us with a tender story of young love and coming of age set against the cultural, social, and political backdrop of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The book portrays, if you read it, you'll know this, with a wonderful directness and lyricism, the interpenetration of private experience in broad historical currents. Through that, it dramatizes the abiding power of a culture's deep values in a time of great upheaval that is quite similar to our own time. The themes in this book of friendship, loyalty, family heritage, and the nature of love speak to us both about the ways we are similar to those from other times and places, and, equally importantly, about the ways we in our local lives, with their particular contexts, heritage, and textures, are unique. Our author, Mahbod Seraji, is at once a great storyteller and a wonderful ambassador for intercultural communication. So with that, I ask you to welcome Mr. Seraji to Villanova.
Wow, thank you very much. That was beautiful. And I didn't write that. I also want to thank everybody for this wonderful evening. And for the last 2 days that I've been here, I can't tell you how I have been treated like a king. And it's been absolutely wonderful. I'm very thankful to all of you for running such a wonderful program. And one of the differences that I think your program has with some of the other schools that do this, and I know this from experience, is that one beautiful aspect of your program is that you get the parents involved. And I've had, in the last few months since the selection, so many great emails from the parents who promised that they would come forward and introduce themselves, so I hope you do at the end of the night. And I also want to thank Dr. Shapari last night for the wonderful party that you had at your house. I really enjoyed it. So let's talk about the book, and let's start this. You know, one of the first questions that people always ask me when they first meet me is, how do you say your name? So I'm going to teach you. In Persian, we say the H. We pronounce the H. So we say Mahbod. Say it. Mahbod. Very good, very good. Now, a lot of times, because that H in English, sort of when it's in the middle of the word, finds that harsh sound. It becomes Mahbod. We drop the and we just say it's Mahbod Seraji. Now, I assure you that in the last 34 years that I've been in the US, I've heard so many different variations of my name that I pretty much respond to anything that even remotely resembles it. So Mahbod, Mabad, Mambad, Mahbod. The one that really upset me was my boat. I couldn't take that. And I had a friend, I swear I'm not making this up. I had a friend who insisted that I say my name wrong. He said, it's Mahbod. I said, okay. Anyway, I came to the States I was born in 1956. So I'll save you the math, that makes me 53 years old. And I came to the States in 1976 with the intention of getting an engineering degree and going home and living a happily ever after type of a life. So what I like to do, having given you that little bit of information, is to do three things tonight. One, to tell you a little bit about myself and why I wrote the book. And as you can tell from my style, I'm very informal, and I like to, hopefully you don't mind that. Then I want to read, keep up with the author event traditions and read a small section of the book that I think represents the Iranian culture. And then I think Iran is a very interesting topic, especially since it's in the media all the time. I think we'll just open it up to question and answers. Sounds good? Very good. So as I said, I came here to the States in 1976 with the intention of getting an engineering degree, and I thought I was really smart and I was going to do it in 3 years and go home. Well, you know, all of us, if you close your eyes for just 5 seconds, you can probably think of a period where you can say, these were absolutely the worst times of my life. These were the worst years of my life. For me, those first 3-4 years that I was in the US were absolutely the worst years of my life, worst time of my life. Not because of the US. I loved this country. I loved the people. I knew 200-300 words of English. So all I could actually order was Big Mac, small fries, a small Coke, and I ate it for a month and a half and gained 17 pounds. But despite the fact that all I could say was that, so I would have conversations like, what are you having for dinner tonight? I have Big Mac, small fries, a small Coke. Despite that, people accepted me and people took me in and people treated me like a real human being. And that was absolutely wonderful. And you know, there are other advantages to going away. You're not, I mean, I'm sorry parents, but you know, you're a kid, you go away, your parents are not there to know what you're doing, and it's just wonderful, right? So I had a great time here in the States. The problem was that it seemed like the minute I left Iran, like they couldn't keep it together anymore. They couldn't hold it together. Everything fell apart. We had the Iranian Revolution, and we were told that we were going to get rid of this tyrant and give you freedom, and as you know how the story turned out. I won't get into that, but you know, the hostages were taken, the Iran-Iraq war started. It was a horrible, horrible time. It was a very difficult time to be an Iranian in the States. I remember you know, right before the revolution, I went to this dealership to buy a car. And after you know, a little bit of conversation, the dealer asked me, well, where are you from? You know, he heard my accent. Where are you from? I said, I'm from Iran. And he said, oh, give me a high five, you know, Iran, friend of the US, the Shah. You know, your father probably owns oil fields. Go ahead and buy any car you want. So the perception was, you know, that everybody in Iran was rich and wealthy, and that they would come here and they spend a ton of money, and they were good people. To go from that to all of a sudden being considered a hostage taker, a potential terrorist, it was a pretty hard transition. I remember I had a friend who his name was Ghulam, and before the revolution he used to go around, and one of his icebreakers with people was, hey, say my name, say Ghulam, and people, you know, that sound is hard to make. People would say Ghulam, and he'll laugh, and then he'll have fun with them, and then, you know, he'll tell everybody he was from Iran. Well, overnight, as soon as the revolution happened and the hostages were taken, he became Tony. You asked him where he was from, and he was from Italy, no longer from Iran. Because it was really a tough time to be an Iranian in the States. And I remember as a student, we were told what streets not to walk through at nights, which places we couldn't go, what happens if somebody knocks on your door, what you're supposed to do late at night. So it was a very, very tough time, you know, that period, because there were some incidents, pretty horrible incidents that happened during that time. But for me, on top of all of that identity crisis that I was all of a sudden facing, I didn't have any money. I didn't come from a very rich family, and as soon as the banking relationships stopped between the US and Iran, parents couldn't send money to their kids. And as a foreign student, you can work 20 hours a week in campus. You can't actually work off campus. So 20 hours times $3.35 or whatever minimum wage was back then, it wasn't a lot of money. I remember I used to smoke back then, bad habit. And there were days that I had to choose between buying a pack of cigarettes or having lunch. And if you ever smoked, you know which one you pick. There were days, I remember one day opening up my refrigerator, and there was a loaf of bread and a bottle of water or a pitcher of water in there, and I wasn't getting paid for another 8 or 9 days. So it was a very difficult time in terms of you know, being here in the U.S. I remember going to the university officials and begging them to let me work 60, 70 hours a week so that they wouldn't turn off my heat. I lived in Iowa City. You know how cold it gets there. And they were kind enough and wonderful enough to respect that and to let me do that. But it was still hard. And I remember one time I was standing outside one of these places where I worked, and I was smoking, and I was thinking to myself, that's it. I'm done. No more starvation. No more worrying about freezing to death. No more worries about not being able to pay the rent and being homeless in Iowa, out of all places. I'm going home. I'm definitely going home. And I am not kidding you. I am not kidding you. I had one of those amazing, It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart type moments for a second. And I thought about, those of you who have read this book, you know what I'm talking about. I thought about the people who were in this book, who are in this book, and thought to myself that if they heard what I'm thinking, they'd be very ashamed of me. And I decided that I'm going to stick it out, stay here, make it happen, but write a book someday. Write a book about people who have a profound impact, who had a profound impact on my life. The kind of people whose presence gives you the strength to do the impossible. The kind of people who, by the sheer presence of their existence, them being in your life, they inspire you to do things that otherwise your spirit can't do by itself. Well, and I thought this was going to be a series of short vignettes. I was going to call it The Stars in My Life. Those of you who've read the book, you know, you get the stars analogy there. But I thought I was going to call it The Stars in My Life, and you know, someday publish it. Well, life changes. You get out of school. One of the benefits of the revolution was that those of us who couldn't go home, we kept getting degrees. So I got a master's degree, I got a PhD, and by then immigration laws had changed and things had changed for me, so I could get a job, and I got a beautiful job with Motorola, and then had a 20-year sort of run in corporate America, doing, knock on wood, very well. And you know, when you're doing well, you sort of forget about those promises you made to yourself when you weren't doing well. So the idea of writing the book kind of went out until 2001, when we had one of those mini recessions, remember? And I lost my job. I didn't care. I thought, I'm going to take 7 months off and write this book. But things had changed by then. So my motivation for writing the book was no longer what I talked about. I think what I was seeing at the time, there were so many books coming out about Iran, about the Middle East. And it seemed like in every single one of them, the men had 43 wives and made their wives chew on rocks for punishment. And that women were portrayed as these helpless creatures wrapped in chadors or veils and thrown into the kitchen, and they had no rights. And the only way that you could be happy was if you moved to the West. And that was not my experience of life in Iran. That was not my experience of women of Iran. This government that's currently in power in Iran has done everything it can to subjugate women, to take their rights away. But the women of Iran have stood up for their rights, fought for their rights every step of the way. When they said, you have to wear chadors, they said, hell no, we won't. They threw them off and they wear scarves. When they said, you can't go to school, now we have twice as many women graduates than we do men graduates. Women of Iran, in my mind, are beautiful, are articulate, are smart, are intelligent, have been fighting for their rights, have been fighting these people back in Iran, shoulder to shoulder, walking side by side with them, even in front of them, to fight this regime. And for me, that portrayal, and I'm not suggesting that that side of life doesn't exist or people shouldn't be writing about that side of life. It's just that I think that was not the whole picture. And I wanted to write about something that talked about something different, that talked about love, that talked about loyalty. We almost look at those books or look at the media images that we see, and we think people in that region don't understand love, don't understand friendship, don't understand loyalty. I was at a book club, and I'm not making this up. One lady said to me, before reading your book, I thought all Iranians were animals. And I wasn't sure how to react to that. To be honest, I wasn't sure if I should be disappointed, I should be angry, I should be upset. But it was very interesting to me that, you know, in the last 30 years, we have seen such a demonization and dehumanization of the people in the Middle East, and specifically Iran, that we almost think that there are 77 million people there who are just basically evil. Just because there are a few very, very bad people running that country that, as we saw last June, don't represent the people of that country. I think there is the problem with this, the problem with what I'm just talking about is this, that I think it has had an impact on our culture. It has had a negative impact on our culture. It has, I think, made us a bit insensitive about political incorrectness toward people of the Middle East. So we tolerate negative things that are said about people of the Middle East easier than people of other places. Now let me give you a couple of quick examples. And I'll use both the Republicans and Democrat sides, so if you're either, please hang in there. But I remember when John McCain was running for president, and he was in Wisconsin. And it was very interesting. He was in this town hall meeting, and this lady stood up, remember, grabbed the microphone and said, Mr. McCain, I don't trust Barack Obama because he's an Arab. To which McCain immediately responded by grabbing the microphone away and said, no, ma'am, he's not an Arab. He's a good family man. And I just did one of those double takes, one of those O's that you did. And then he continued. He said, he's a good citizen of the United States with whom I have some disagreements. And I remember turning to my wife and I said, hail to the chief, Mr. Obama. That's it. This guy is finished. This is the end of his campaign. Now, I know McCain didn't mean that. McCain is not a bigot. I know that. So it just came out, I think, wrong. But people say a lot of things that they don't mean it the way it comes out, and they get in trouble for it. But you know what the problem with this situation was? Nobody noticed it. No one said a word about it. Now, if you had taken that word Arab and substituted any other nationality or people of any other faith or religion or background in that sentence, that would have been the end of McCain's run, in my opinion. Okay. Now, not only nobody noticed, what was interesting to me was that the next day, Keith Olbermann said this was McCain's finest moment in the campaign. McCain's finest moment through the campaign. Why? Because McCain refused to play that game of, people used to call him Barack Hussein Obama. God forbid if somebody calls him Barack Hussein Obama. In fact, Barack Hussein Obama didn't call himself Barack Hussein Obama until he went to the University of Cairo, if you recall, and he said, I am Barack Hussein Obama, and he got a standing ovation by the people over there. Remember that? So I think that's part of what has happened, and this is why I wanted to write a book that talked about people. I wanted to remind people that Iran is full of real people. I wanted to talk about the universality of certain experiences that we all have as human beings, and that our nationalities, our cultures, the way we are, our religions, they don't dehumanize us. And that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about love, loyalty. I wanted to show that women in Iran stand up for their rights and go and fight for what they believe is right, as Fahima does when she refuses to marry the person that she has been engaged to. Or as Zari, some of you I'm sure haven't read the story, so I won't exactly say what she did, but what Zari did to stand up for what she believed, to show the courage that throwing a red rose at the Shah and saying it doesn't matter how many red roses you destroy, that there will be more. There will be more red roses in this country. Or Pasha going and planting a red rose, which, by the way, signifies a great revolutionary that we had in Iran by the name of Khosrow Gol-e-Sorkhi, who Gol-e-Sorkh basically means the red rose, and that's where all of the red rose symbolism comes from. Or the gadfly symbolism, for example. As you know, the gadfly is the story of a revolutionary who stands up for his rights and sacrifices himself for it. And then Zari, of course, asks the question of, do you think Socrates was wrong in accepting his fate and not escaping from prison, and what Socrates nicknamed the gadfly, right? So there's all of that symbolism, and I wanted to talk about that and make sure that people realize that Iran is a beautiful country, full of beautiful people. Those of you who have been to Iran, a lot of you have actually sent me emails about that. Some of you have been there. It's a beautiful country, full of beautiful people, incredibly hospitable, incredibly wonderful. And I hope that somehow we get to stop, that we can get rid of this regime that's currently in Iran that unfortunately gives Iranians a black eye, and that the relationships between our countries, between Iran and the US, goes back to the days that if I went to buy a car, I would get a high five and ask him how many oil fields my father has. All right. I know that was a little bit of a serious, more probably serious talk than was I planned, but I wanted to share that. What I'd like to do now, jump immediately into reading a couple of small sections to show a little bit of the Persian culture, and then open it up to question and answers. Is that okay? So the story, for those of you who haven't read it, is about a bunch of kids who are living in Tehran, and they, one of the kids, Pasha, the narrator, is a very smart, intelligent kid, and he is in this mental institution, and he has no idea why he's there. Okay? And the story goes back between winter of 1974 and summer of 1973. So, I'm going to read this first section and then another small section. Winter of 1974, Ruzbeh Psychiatric Hospital, Tehran. I hear someone's voice chanting, and the repetitive verses lap like water at the edge of my consciousness. If I had a book, I would read it. If I had a song, I would sing it. I look around until I see an old man standing a few meters away, chanting in a steady, empty tone. The place does not look familiar to me. The blue robe that covers my body, the wheelchair I'm sitting in, the sunlight creeping between the shades that warms me, all feel strange. If I knew a dance, I would dance it. If I knew a rhyme, I would chant it. If I had a life, I would risk it. If I could be free, I would chance it. Outside in the yard, men of all shapes and ages shuffle around in blue robes. There's something peculiar about each of them. They look lost. Suddenly, a surge of emotions fills my chest and rushes into my throat. A little nurse with a kind, full face that resembles an apple runs up to me and plants her hands on my shoulders and screams, "Help me out here! Help me out!" A man in a white uniform runs over and tries to hold me down. "Stay in your chair, honey, stay in your chair," Appleface shouts, which means I must be moving. I focus on sitting still and look toward the old man on the far side of the room. He's gazing at me as he frantically repeats his mantra. "If I had a horse, I would ride it. If I had a horse, I would ride it. If I had a horse." I'm taken to a room with a bed, and Appleface says, "I'm going to give you a sedative to make you feel better, darling." I feel a pinch in my arm, and suddenly my head and arms become unbearably heavy. I'm going to read another small section, and this is when he's actually out of the hospital, and his family in Iran. The tradition is that if you get out of you're sick and you get out of the hospital, you go home. Almost everybody in the world shows up to see you. And this section is supposed to be funny, so please feel free to laugh. And this is what his aunts and his uncles and his grandma, grandpa are coming to see him, or have come to see him. Aunt Maryam is a pretty woman with a face that looks more European than Iranian. When my grandparents aren't around, her brothers tease her that she's an illegitimate child, perhaps conceived by the Russian soldiers who were occupying the north during World War II. Aunt Maryam always shakes her head and laughs. She has a great sense of humor, and I've always liked her a lot. Aunt Maryam is almost always argumentative and sometimes even contentious toward her brother, my Uncle Mansour. Sometimes they don't talk for months, and although they live in the same alley, they avoid each other at all costs. It's fascinating to watch the two of them argue because neither of them ever gets a chance to finish a sentence. So now, when they fight, instead of talking, they write letters to each other, which they read to the entire family before mailing it to the intended receiver. Their letters always start with an expression of love, but quickly disintegrates into bitter disclosure of the sacrifices one has made for the sake of the other. Dear sister, Uncle Mansour once wrote, I just realized I have some cuss words here I can't use. I've heard you told everyone that I don't love you. Baloney. You know that I love you. I've always loved you, but I never will again. In fact, no brother, and I mean no brother in the world, could love his sister as much as I have loved you. Remember when your tonsils were taken out and you were in bed crying for ice cream? Who ran 6 kilometers in the rain to get it for you? Do you recall the time you twisted your ankle on the way home from school? Who carried you home on his back? Don't I always check up on you and ask you if you need anything when I'm going to the market? Have you ever done anything for me or for anybody else? No, you're so selfish. I will never love you again. Aunt Mariam responded with a letter of her own. Dear brother Mansour, she wrote back, you never loved anyone but yourself. You are the selfish one. I have sacrificed my life for you. I mended for you, cooked for you, cleaned for you, washed dishes for you. I can fill a book listing what I have done for you, maybe 2 books. I will never do any of those things for you again because you are selfish and you don't understand the love of a sister. Too bad for you. Goodbye forever. No one will ever hear your name from my lips again. No one. I will forget that I ever had a brother named, well, whatever your name is. Goodbye. Of course, someone always intervenes and the two kiss and make up, promising never to discuss the stupid conflict again. It's water under the bridge, Uncle Mansour says. What's past is past, Aunt Mariam agrees. Only a fool reopens a wound that's already healed. Who hasn't had a fight with her own brother? Fighting is the salt of life. A small amount of it makes life delicious. They go on as if nothing has happened until the next time they fight, and then all the issues resurface. Then a little bit later, about his grandpa, just a little bit. Grandpa is a quiet, skinny man who walks with the aid of a cane and always wears a gray suit. He was a revolutionary activist during Mossadegh's era and hated the Shah and his pseudo-reform policies that only strengthened his position as the sole authoritarian voice in Iran. Grandpa, like many in his generation, hates the British with a passion that makes his face red every time someone mentions Churchill's names. This is some cuss words here. Colonialist, he regarded the Indians the same way Hitler viewed the Jews, he says of the British Prime Minister. Given the chance, he would have incinerated the Indians just like Hitler did the poor Jews. As an atheist, Grandpa also hates organized religion. Show me an honest clergyman, Islamic clergyman, and I'll show you a skunk that doesn't stink, he says every time there's a discussion of Islamic religion. My father always laughs at his remarks. Thank God he hates everybody equally, the mullahs, the priests, the monks, the rabbis, the politicians. Grandpa never watches television or listens to the news on the radio. My father says he has a collection of magazines and newspapers from Mossadegh's era that he guards with his life. Every morning he takes one of the papers out of a box by his bed and reads it cover to cover as if it's fresh off the press. I wonder how many times he has read each article by now. Grandpa kisses my closed eyes, then sits in the chair by the grandfather clock that hasn't worked for years and asks my grandma for a cup of tea. My mother tells Grandma to sit still and runs to the kitchen to bring tea, sweets, and fruits. Grandpa looks at the clock beside him, and I whisper that the time is wrong. He looks at me and then looks at the clock again, but doesn't say anything. After a few seconds, I hear him whispering, "It's not wrong, it just shows a different time." Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to stop here and open it up to questions and answers.